Yeah, let's get to the fair income stuff. Hoyne, enough of the politics. Welcome to you.
Thanks, G. Thanks, Kane. It always seems to be plenty happening on a Tuesday when I come in here.
Yep.
There's usually plenty of tribunal stuff, and then this morning a coach sacking. It's sort of, no, it's all systems go, but pleasure to be here as always.
Okay, let's get stuck straight into the overall observations because we are behind time. Why don't you give us your view of the Gold Coast, where they actually sit?
Yeah, so I think at a stage like this, it just gives you an opportunity to actually have a bit of a look at the list to actually start with, and
The list.
the bloody list, as you would say, and what have you. And it's a list that's not necessarily that young anymore, and we should be treating it a little bit differently. And I just posed the question to you off air. So right now, their age and their games profile this year is identical to Essendon.
Right.
And you got clearly got one team that's on the verge of playing finals, another one that's just sacked their coach. So. When and I was doing this exercise today, when you try and put down their best 22 on paper for 2024, and I haven't included those three young kids. I haven't seen them yet, so I'm not really sure on what sort of skill level they've got. But when you put it
immense.
down, is it? Yeah, it's not that young. So there's only really two babies that I actually put down in that.
Here's Humphrey.
Yeah, so Bailey Humphrey and then Elijah Holland. So hopefully he can actually get a good run at it from an injury perspective. So they're not that young.
What about Mac Andrew?
And they're not that old. Oh, and Mac Andrew, sorry, forgot about him. So there's three youngsters down there. And then they only have two players that are actually over the age of 30, and that's Gerard, who will be 30, and David Swallow. So it's in that it should be
in the sweet spot.
In that absolute sweet spot where they're about to launch. We had this discussion internally today, sort of based off the team that I put together, for next year. And we come up with about 11 to 13 players where you could easily mount a case where they should be still improving. So I think that's exciting for the new coach to come on board, whether or not that natural improvement will actually sort of come to fruition or not. But you can easily have that debate where you go, okay, so and so is going to improve, so and so is going to improve, and what have you. So I think that there's enough there for Gold Coast to actually work with where you should be considering them for sort of that sort of 7 to 10 position next year.
So, Hoyne, the leak from the club was that they were concerned about strategy and preparation. Where do they? What is their downfall in those two facets of a pretty important part of the game?
Yeah, so the strategy component's an interesting one. So looking from the outside, and I've talked about this all year, the transition and the turnover game, that is the game. If you can't compete in that phase of the game, the chances of you having success are minimal. 17 of the last 18 premiers have been top three in that phase of the game. They've really prioritised their stoppage and contest game, which is okay, but they're not getting anywhere near the same returns for it. So let's have a look at their clearance game just to start with, and that's all I want to focus in on tonight. So these are the top four clearance teams in the competition. Brisbane 1, Dogs 2, Suns 3, Port 4. So if you think about clearance and you go back to Thursday night with Richmond Sydney, if you dominate clearance, you should be dominating time in forward half.
Yep.
So let's have a look at those four teams. So Brisbane, number 1 for time in forward half. The Dogs, number 4 for time in forward half. Port, number 2 for time in forward half. Gold Coast, 13th. So there's no method and there's no strategy behind those exits to be able to actually get the forward half game going, to be able to get the forward half turnover game going. The ball leaves stoppage, goes forward, and then it bounces straight back out constantly. So they've never been able to actually get the absolute return from Anderson, from Miller, from Rao, and then from Witts as well. So they've got the personnel there.
Why is it so? Is it because they're too tall or their tools don't apply pressure?
I think it's it's the way in which they're actually exiting stoppage.
Right.
And then when they're actually going forward, their mids are actually getting left behind because they're too focused in on actually winning that absolute stoppage situation, and they're not actually spreading their numbers to the outside to then be able to play and then be able to defend the transition game. The transition game, as I keep saying, is king. They haven't been able to play it well for a number of years now, probably almost ever, if you like. So, whoever that new coach is, that's the area of the game that I'll be focusing on. You've got a strength, but you've got to focus in on the number one aspect of the game, and that's a transition game.
All right, Hoyne, your 7 main talking points from the weekend. Let's start with the Western Bulldogs. I assume there was some good, but there was also some bad, as there always is with the Dogs.
Yeah, so they're a hard one to work out at the moment, the Dogs. So I thought their game, and I'm not too sure what you two thought, I thought their game against Collingwood was actually one of their better performances.
I'd
for the
agree with
year.
that.
So,
Except for a couple of kicks inside forward 50.
yeah, so they did a lot right. So they were able to actually, comprehensively win the transition game against Collingwood, outscoring the ball almost 5 goals from turnover, which never happens against Collingwood. They were able to deny Collingwood their 4.5 turnover game. Collingwood are the number 1 team for generating entries. The Dogs restricted them to 45. Collingwood's contest work this year has been fantastic. They won that comprehensively, and they were able to have more shots at them. So we're talking about the best team in the competition, and they were able to do all that against them. The concern at the moment for the Dogs, and this was evident on Friday night, just sitting back and watching it, is their inability to be able to defend ball movement going back the other way. So they were able to stop Collingwood's forward half game and deny them that, but they couldn't stop their ball movement. So Collingwood were able to score 48 points from defensive half work. So to put that into context, AFL average is 30 points. So over the last 6 or 7 weeks, only West Coast, Hawthorn and North have been easier to score against off the back of ball movement. So that's the issue for me at the moment, and perhaps that's the issue that we're actually seeing at the moment with no Liam Jones behind the ball. We keep talking a lot about this show that you need to have that elite interceptor behind the ball that can cause disruption to the opposition's ball movement. They don't have that player behind the footy at the moment. So if you're playing against the Dogs, you almost look up and you've almost got free access to be able to go quick, to be able to go aggressive, and to be able to challenge this defensive half group. So that's the concern for me at the moment, how they actually address that. And then the other fact, when I was actually having a look at this today, I was actually quite surprised. Is just their overall record against the best in the competition this year.
Is it 1-7?
1-6 against top 8 teams with a percentage of 75. There's only 3 teams in the comp this year that haven't won a game against the top 8 teams on the ladder at the moment, and they've only won 1 of 7 starts against the best in the competition. So trying to work out where they sit at the moment, as you said, Kane, they're doing a lot right, and they're doing some really poor sort of performances at the moment as well.
Got to say, Hoyne, Freo were a hard watch on the weekend.
They've been a hard watch for most of the year, haven't they? I mean, I don't sort of like making the big statements, but I was sort of sitting back watching that, and I think I might have said to you, yesterday, G, that outside of West Coast and Hawthorn and North Melbourne, I thought that was probably almost one of the worst performances I've seen from a team this year, just given the stakes and given who they were actually playing against.
And at home.
Correct. So the interesting part with Freo and sort of we're having a look at it in the off season, and I'm sure you would have been across this as well, Kane, is just their off season and what actually happened in the off season. So last year they win 14, 15 games, whatever it was, and they finished 3 or 4 goals away from a prelim. But then they've gone from being sort of a mid-table team in terms of age and games to now only Hawthorn are younger and less experienced than what Fremantle are. So to lose the likes of Lobb, Akers, Logue, Tucker and Meek, they might not sound like absolute household names, but they're all in that nice bracket of 25, 26, 27 years of age. And then Mundy retires. So they've lost a lot of experience. And you go back 12 months to where their team was, their selected team in round 17 to their selected team in round 17 this year. They've lost almost a year's worth of experience. So it's quite bizarre in terms of what's happened over that off-season when, a lot of us would have been sitting back at the end of last year going, well, this team's almost, sort of ready to peak right now. And right now you look at that and you go, well, perhaps we actually just need to reassess where this team is actually at.
What about the way they're playing, Hoyne? There's always been a lot of discussion on it.
Yeah, I think...
If you broke them down as far as transition and forward half.
Well, right now, and this might sound harsh, they don't have a point of difference on the competition, which they're able to actually throw back at you. So, we talk a lot about if you're playing a game that's relying on the control method of taking 90, 100, 110 marks, the chances of you having success across the whole season is not there. Even when they won those 4 or 5 games in a row, whatever it was, 5, 6 weeks ago, and people started to get excited about it, the way they were playing wasn't sustainable. It wasn't through the turnover game. It wasn't through the transition game. It was off the back of their stoppage work. And they were losing the turnover game considerably. This is where sort of, you need that sort of big picture, deep breath to look at it and go, are you playing this sustainable brand of footy? And when they were winning those 4 or 5 games, the answer was no. But it is easy to get sucked in when you're winning 4 or 5 in a row. And now we're actually seeing that exposed. When you're able to sort of nullify Fremantle in in that stoppage situation. They haven't got the ability to be able to defend you in terms of ball movement, and then they've got absolutely no capability of being able to go back at you the other way.
Hoyne's in the house for Champion Data. If you've got a question for him, send it through off the temper text 043390 1116. We'll set aside some time for him to answer your questions as we move on to the Bombers, and another quiet forward has caught your attention.
Yeah, so I'm really interested to see now what Essendon do with Sam Wiedemann and this magnet here. So I keep looking at this and I keep thinking back to Richmond of 2017. So Richmond of 2017 were wedded to playing two key forwards until about round 9 or round 10, where their second key forward was going no good. And then that's when they sort of bit the bullet and decided to go with this small forward approach. And you read that premiership book at the end of the year, and that's what they said. It was all by accident. It wasn't by design.
Josh Caddy ended up almost the second tall, didn't
and
he?
Jacob Townsend.
Yeah, Jacob Townsend.
Came in around 21. So I'm looking at Sam Wiedemann at the moment, and this might sound harsh, but 6 weeks in a row of being held goalless. That's only 5 times we've seen a key forward do that over the last 18 years. So he is in rare air, unfortunately for him. 19 times he's been targeted. That's it in 6 weeks, and the return that they've got 1 goal off the back of him being targeted inside 50. That's just nowhere near, the sort of return that you get from any sort of target inside 50. And I'm having a look at their twos on the weekend and having a look at sort of,
who's next up?
Even Dylan Shield on the weekend. I'd be going small. I'd be looking to bring someone like a Davey in who had a really good game in the VFL 2 weeks ago. I'd be looking to see whether or not Sardis is almost ready to rock and roll. He's played a few games now in the twos.
Was he pick 5, wasn't he?
Yeah, pick 5. Whether I'm having a look at Dylan Shield to play him inside 50, whether I'm having a look at Tipper again, sort of whether or not he's actually got some fitness back. But I think, yes, they're going well, but you've still got to look at finding ways to get better.
They can go weller.
Yeah, well, they can go well. And if I'm looking ahead to their opponent against Geelong this week, they are a very tall back 6, back 7. Their intercept marking is the best in the competition, so that might be the challenge. But the challenge can also be to throw at them. Is to go small ball. Go small ball against them. Have Peter Wright as your key
Stringer.
forward.
Like Stringer is the other one I got to watch on. He's got to do more.
Well, Stringer's last 2 weeks have been his 2 lowest rated games of the season. So I heard you say it last. I couldn't agree more. And the fact that they should have almost won those 2 games is a huge positive for them. So they've got significant room for improvement with that magnet. And then I think they seriously now have to start looking at what to do with Sam Wiedemann. Who am I? It was the fewest entries they've had in a game this year. It was their 4th worst ground ball result. They lost the shots at goal, had fewer shots at goal, and it was their 5th lowest pressure game.
Sounded like the Demons to me.
Yeah, we had some good questions or some good answers come through. We've had Collingwood come through a fair few times.
Who won Collingwood and the Bulldogs on expected score? Somebody wanted to know.
Collingwood only by 2 points.
Okay,
so
right.
no, it was really tight. But this Guess Who for this week is Melbourne. So the reason why I just wanted to put this in play this week is just to reiterate, the importance of accuracy and what good accuracy can do in terms of masking, some problems, and what poor accuracy can do in terms of masking some good that's actually happening in your game. So everyone has talked about Melbourne's inability to score for weeks, and we've done the same thing as well. And and don't forget, I'm still big on Melbourne in terms of what they're doing contest and defence wise. So, but in terms of what they did on the weekend, if they had a kick to expectation, they're only kicking 61 points for the game. So they only had 18 shots. They've averaged 26 between round 10 to 16, and meant to be averaging 80 points. So so based on expected accuracy, they're meant to be should have kicked 19 points less than what they're meant to have been averaging the previous 6 weeks. And if St Kilda had a kick to expectation, Melbourne lose this game by 7 points. And then the narrative is completely different. So, as I said, I'm still big on Melbourne, but that performance on the weekend against St Kilda, for me, there's still a long way to go. I like what they did in terms of sort of trying to experiment, and we've been talking about Petrarca a lot, and so is Kingy, and so many people as well. So it was great to see them sort of change that up, but they still have a fair way to go in terms of what they're doing offensively.
Yes, indeed. It is amazing the masking of accuracy, as you said, because right now, if the Demons have lost a 4th game out of 5, I think it is,
People will be riding them off, saying that they're done and they can't win it.
We don't trust the Demons.
Yeah, correct, 100%. So it's just not jumping to conclusions based off that.
Okay, speaking
performance
of
on the
clubs
weekend.
we do trust, and the coach is a very big fan of your segment. What have you got about the Brisbane Lions?
Yeah, so just want to give the Lions some love at the moment, and sort of, it's a huge night, clearly a huge night for them on Friday night against Melbourne. But I think if there's any time in which they're going to get Melbourne and put on a real statement, it is Friday night, because their game is in as good a shape as it could possibly be at the moment, and has been in any sort of campaign heading into a final series for Brisbane. So rather than looking at points scored and points for, I sort of tend to look at how often you actually turn a chain into a score, and how often you actually restrict the opposition from doing the same thing. So this year, Brisbane are the second most potent team in the competition in terms of turning possession into a score. And then they're the third hardest team in the competition to turn a possession into a score against. There's no team in the competition that's top three on both sides of the ball this year. And to actually show sort of how rare that is, in 20 years, we've only seen two teams ranked number one in both phases. And that was Geelong last year, and they won a flag by 81 points. And that was Geelong in 07, and they won a flag by 119 points. So in terms of what Brisbane are doing at the moment, it's rock solid. Last 6 weeks, their forward 50 is functioning the second best in the competition, and their D50 is working the second best in the competition. Their ball movement game has gone from 15th in the competition to now number one in the competition in terms of turning a D50 chain into a forward 50 chain. So, they have been a little bit more aggressive. They've sort of taken on the corridor a little bit more, but not too much more. And the beauty is as well, sort of having a look at the 100X rating system. Over this last 6-7 week period, they only have one player to actually rank in the top 50 players in the competition, and that's Harris Andrews, who's 25th in the competition. So they're so even in terms of their balance across all 3/3 of the ground. So, so Lachie Neale has got back to good form over the last couple of weeks, but it's not so much, shut Lachie Neale down or that's it anymore. They've got so many weapons and they're so even across the board that, if I'm sitting here next Tuesday night and they haven't beaten Melbourne, I'll be really, really surprised and really disappointed, and that will unfortunately change my thing, but I'm confident that they won't.
So the storyline will be about their form in Melbourne. It's their last trip to the MCG, possibly before the grand final.
Yeah.
That's the way that they come and play Collingwood in Marvel in round 23. So the importance of this game, not only for, I think Port Adelaide are vulnerable in second position. They're incredibly banged up. They're not going to keep winning, and this win streak will eventually come to an end, despite the curse that's been placed upon them. And they've got a tough
That's a
draw.
reverse curse, Kane.
It's a reverse curse, Gerard.
I do laugh at that every time you say that.
Just the importance of top two. For you're either coming to Adelaide to play Port Adelaide in a qualifying final, or you're hosting Port Adelaide at the Gabba, where you don't lose. So the back end of this and the last opportunity, and these interstate clubs don't get enough opportunity at the MCG, we know that. So I guess on the prime time stage, the importance of this game can't be undersold. And
I'm sort of with you as well, Kane. I don't think that top two is actually locked away for Port Adelaide just yet as well. I mean, they've got a really challenging draw over the next 4 or 5 week period. And if I'm looking for Brisbane, I'm confident that they'll win against Melbourne this week. And then it's only really that Collingwood game in round 23 where I look at their fixture and I go, geez, I'm probably not confident that they'll beat Collingwood that game. The only thing that I'm looking for Brisbane this week is how they actually defend ball movement on the big, wide ground of the G. That's where Hawthorn ripped them apart 4 or 5 weeks ago. Hawthorn's ability to be able to win the ball back, switch the ball, go the other side of the ground, and then go back in was something that I haven't seen from Brisbane for a number of years.
And before we start throwing up nonsense about the geography of the MCG, it's 2 metres longer at either end
than
the Gabba.
Yep.
And it's 1.5 metres wider at either wing.
Well, yeah.
So don't give me geography.
I'm not giving you geography.
I know you're not.
I'm just giving you. I'm just giving you stone cold.
I know you're definitely not geography. You're not that silly.
Hoyne, Dustin Martin is back.
Yeah, he is, and just want to celebrate what this guy's doing, because I think quite often with someone who's just performed to the levels that he's done for such a long time, we could actually overlook the performances that he's actually delivering on field at the moment. So the fact that he's played 88% of forward time this year and he's averaging 22 disposals hasn't been done by a forward in 5 years. So he's in rare air in terms of that, in terms of that ability, and the beauty about his profile at the moment is that against top 8 teams compared to bottom 10 teams, he's performing 30% better against the best.
Rising to the challenge of the top
compared
10.
to the bottom 10. He's kicked 10 goals against the best this year, only 4 against the bottom 10.
He's in your All-Australian team? He's not quite, is he?
You took the words out of my mouth. He wasn't in your team last week, Hoyne.
No, he's 4th at the moment for his position so he's very, very, very close.
I reckon there's a real opportunity, and you could call him a small forward in that spot, because Charlie Cameron's form, I think he's kicked 5 goals in the last 5 weeks. Yeah. Toby Green's enormous. Tick. Yep. Probably Petrarca might get, has had that spot before, and if he continues to play forward, that's a problem that can be solved by putting him forward. But there's a spot there. It's
pretty open, isn't it? And as I said, it's 88% forward time that he's played this year. So if you pick him in the forward bucket, people can't argue with that. I mean, he has played that role. The other side to his game that I just want to give a bit of credit as well is that he's only gone in for 53 centre bounces this year, but he's the number 1 centre bounce player in the competition.
Is he?
So when he goes in there, Richmond are winning the centre bounce clearance 56% of the time.
Gee.
AFL number 1. So what this guy's doing is just, we do need to celebrate it, and I understand that it is hard to compare to previous seasons, but what he's doing this year, just looking at that alone, needs to be recognised and could be an All-Australian smoky still.